The next topic we're going to dive into is change. IT departments enforce change throughout organizations, from little things like upgrading from Windows 8 to Windows 10 to big things like rolling out new ERP systems. However, IT departments themselves tend to be very slow in the evolution of change. They've got the things in the back of the room that they like to keep. They've got the way they've been doing things, and they don't really prioritize their own change or modernization, which I think is a lot of the digital transformation that's been going on right now. But core IT is slow to change. So, Rob, what are some of the things you've seen with IT trying to change there, or the business moving faster than IT, that really drives a lot of that?
Well, I think one of the things that actually just kind of weighs down an IT department is traditionally we've always done it this way, right? It's culture, and that whole mentality of we've always done it this way works for us. We don't need to change, right? But they do need to change, obviously. And I think in some aspects, when you look at technology and trying to keep up with technology and stay somewhat current or modern, I think that part probably that needle moves a little more so than other aspects. I think process kind of falls behind. I think the idea of waterfall versus agile is a huge thing that people tend to stay buried in waterfall for a long time because it's what they know. They're comfortable with it. It's just,
and they've seen success with it.
They've seen success with it. Yes, it takes some time, and they're not comfortable with the change, and they don't have the knowledge of Agile or Scrum or those newer methodologies, which aren't so new anymore these days, really. But they just stick with what they know.
Does a lot of it come from kind of what you know, but also even the project plan from the earlier conversation, or the business plan, is that the IT department as a whole doesn't really know where, as a whole, they're going. They're not really working on a modernization strategy for themselves. They may be talking about, we're going to upgrade our ERP, or we're going to roll out this new thing, but they don't really look forward to, how am I going to get my developers, switched over to Agile? Not because of a project, but because that's the way we want to go. Or I'm not going to start incorporating, the architecture into the beginning of the project, and really start modernize those things. How can we look at the clients we've been at or our own past experiences to start that process of change?
I think it starts with leadership. You need an executive sponsor, someone out there saying, this is what I want to do. This is the direction that we're taking IT. These are the things that I see as far as change goes, things that we're going to implement because for the greater good of not only the department, but for the business as a whole. And without that, I think that without that clear direction, you don't have it in anybody's mind that change is necessary, change is needed, change is something that we should be doing. So I think somebody in leadership out there banging the drum, leading the way, setting a clear path towards the direction that we want to
IT leadership or business?
I think it's both. I think the idea of take it from the C-suites, and they're going to state things from a company perspective, business goals. At the department level, leadership within IT's got to look at that and think, how can we best support that? And from there, they have to understand whether or not change is required. Maybe they're already doing some of those modern practices and they're just looking for improvements. But others that are, again, more traditional aspects of IT where they're still waterfall and still maybe an older tech stack, leadership at that point has to come around and say, we need to be better here. We need to improve here. We need to be able to implement modern practices. Maybe we want to become agile. Maybe and then state why. They got to rally the people, have everybody understand what we're doing and why. They have to set a clear path forward. This is where we're going. Here's where we are now. Here's where we want to be tomorrow. The why in support of the business, and have a plan in place that is going to take us from point A to point B.
And I think from like the client where we're at now, we put a flag 3 years out and said we're going to be cloud native in 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I think then we use that as a guiding rail for, are we going to develop to cloud native? Am I going to buy new infrastructure to it? Do I have architectural guidelines that everything is aligned to the cloud, so that every project that we put on the roadmap for 21 or even for 22 are marching towards that flag? And if, the development process is to go to, Lambdas or whatever in AWS, then you've got to back up a step and say, okay, well, I've got to get my people trained. I've got to get, the day zero foundational things built. I've got to get all the pieces marching that direction. So, it's not about a specific project. It's about the whole department moving forward to achieve those goals.
I mean, I guess what I would add to that, another thing that we need to take into consideration is fear to fail, right? IT is not rewarded to fail, and it's the exact opposite. But to, I think, improve faster, some level of failure has to be accepted, because like you look at sales. Sales is the ultimate failure machine, right? You've got to go fail a whole bunch of times before you find a new customer. And marketing is kind of the same way. So I mean, that's built into those cultures for those groups, is that yes, what you're doing isn't perfect. There's going to be failures, but eventually you're going to succeed, and we're going to grow. We have to figure out, how do we fail in IT in a safe way, right? So how do we experiment safely? How do we do things safely, but be willing to take more risk than what we have been in the past? Because if we're not willing to take risk, where's the incentive to try to change? And that's, I think, a big reason why folks want to hang on to, well, this is the way I've always done it. It always works. There's low risk if I do this. Whereas if I do something new and it's unknown, we've got to figure out how to de-risk that quickly so that we can do it consistently.
Yeah, that's a really good point with the fear to fail, because I mean, in IT, nothing's allowed to fail. Right. You can't write code that doesn't work. You can't have a server that crashes. You can't have a security breach. You can't have anything. There's nothing like, let's try it until we get it right. I mean, that's, we were joking earlier about QA. How many times are you allowed to write code and fail QA? That's not how you do it. You got to have your requirements right. You should go to QA once and pass. Otherwise, something's wrong in the process.
But you like to think that whole fail fast, fail small mentality is something implemented as part of the development lifecycle, but that by the time you get to pushing code out to production, those failures don't happen.
Well, but I think in order to get IT on the change wagon, you've got to do more of the R&D you were talking about before. Go take XYZ product into your AWS sandbox and see if it works. I mean, when we had Jack build the login thing in Azure, it's like, this is cumbersome on-prem. Can you make it work without rewriting it? And it was like a 3 or 4 day activity, and it failed many times, but then it was a very interesting, can we use it this way? I think if you could get that type of culture going, people raise their hand, hey, I could make this widget better if I did this. I think it would help.
And I would say we need to encourage people to be okay with failing, even when they go to production. The thing that we have to do is put policy and procedure in place so that we catch our failures quickly and can course correct. Because nothing's ever going to be perfect. And if we're trying to make things perfect, we're always going to go too slow. Whereas if I think, have an environment where you can catch and see problems quickly, you can work to resolve them and go forward.
Yeah, I mean, to me, but failing in prod doesn't seem like an okay thing to do.
Well, it's risk reward, right? I mean, look at Tampa Bay last year. No risk it, no biscuit, right? If you're not willing to go big, and if going big is something that you can't do in your business, you've got to determine how far you can go and then be willing to push that a little bit, but also have a safety net.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, whether it's fail small or fail fast. But I've always heard it as fail fast, fail forward, so that you're fixing and moving back instead of going back the code or whatever. To get tooling in place, to get process in place, so that if you have that failure in prod, or I need this in prod this week, being okay with it may not be perfect, as opposed to spending 3 weeks in QA to test everything. People are still happy with 90% working and, come back for the rest of it. I mean, game development has taken that a lot recently. They do alphas for years. They're willing to put a game out there that's not perfect, knowing that there's bugs in it, and people are happier with that for something new and different rather than perfect. Perfect would take years to get that.
Well, and you have to consider the industry that you're in too. Gaming is one thing, and no one's getting hurt if a game fails.
Right, but I think that if people thought about that, some of it's perception. That, well, I can't do this. People view me. What if a page airs out? But if you develop that culture, either as IT or as product, is that an option? is it an option to get a new widget for you to play with, like you on Microsoft Word or something that does, something awesome, but occasionally, gets a column out of whack or something. That may be okay too. You're right. You got to look at your industry. If you're prescribing drugs, there's probably not a lot of room for error, but, maybe if you're, doing some documentation, there is. But I think you just work on that culture of trying things and having the guardrails up so that people are free to try, and know that leadership will support them. A lot of times I see the culture of change fail because somebody fails and then gets whacked with a stick. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to try that anymore because I'm tired of getting whacked with a stick.
Right. And then you also have to have the learning process in place, because once you have a failure, you need to take a step back, dissect what the failure was, and hopefully find some improvements coming out of that. And then if those improvements are good, you need to celebrate that stuff. I mean, if we don't start rewarding some of those behaviors that were questionable in the past, we're never ever going to get the outcomes we want going forward.
Well, and I think that's where some of that executive sponsorship comes into play. Starts at the top, whether it's, again, C-suite or the departmental leaders coming in and saying, it's okay. This is okay. You can, don't be afraid to fail. You can kick the tires on things, and whether in some sandbox or dev environment, and fail as many times as you want or is necessary to be able to produce something valuable, or determine that what you're trying to do is not valuable and walk away from it. And then I'd say beyond that point, it's good to be able to share those experiences with the rest of your team so they understand some of the work that you did and some of the failures and things that you've encountered, so that they don't have to go and repeat the process themselves.
I think even getting people out of their normal day, like I was thinking about the hackathon that we did at Prime TSR, where everybody stepped away from their job, spent 2 days, doing something new and different that really allows them to push the envelope to whatever direction they want to go with, failure is expected.
Yes.
2 days to solve a big business problem isn't going to work, but working as a team, doing something different, everybody learns from the example, and then take that back to clients, to internal IT, and move forward from there. I think getting IT to change really enables a lot of business potential, but you got to do it with leadership and with guardrails and good reasons for doing it.